Let's update you on developments across Latin America. First, Brazil, which is marking its deadliest day from coronavirus since the start of this pandemic. For the first time, the country's daily death toll reached 1,000 people. The country now has the third highest deaths from coronavirus in the world. And as infections soar, warnings from Brazil's biggest city, Sao Paulo, are dire. Officials there believe that the health system is close to collapse.
Estamos perdendo essa batalha contra o vírus.
We're losing the battle against the virus. That's the reality. The virus at this moment is winning the war. These days coming up, the holidays, I don't see them as holidays, but I see them as battle days. The most important days in the fight against the virus.
Well, there have been many twists in President Bolsonaro's strategy in tackling this pandemic. And here's another one. Today, the government loosened its protocols of the use of the unproven drug hydroxychloroquine to treat COVID-19, despite warnings by experts that it has dangerous side effects. Well, here's a physician at a hospital in Sao Paulo.
The only way hydroxychloroquine could be a solution to end social isolation measures would be if hydroxychloroquine would have a huge effect in preventing COVID-19 to getting worse. And this huge effect is not observed anywhere in the world. We already have some publications from New York, from other places in United States reporting that there is no benefit. And if there is a benefit, which will be detected by a randomized controlled trial, we'll soon be publishing our results. It will be something of a smaller magnitude, and it's not enough to end social distancing measures.
Well, let's bring in our Brazil correspondent, Katie Watson, joining us live from Sao Paulo. So not everyone agrees with Brazil's president when it comes to this unproven drug.
No, but it's long been a desire of his to be able to push this drug through for people with mild symptoms, and that's exactly what he's done. In fact, it's cost him two health ministers, one who he fired just over a month ago because of the disagreement over social distancing, and last week we saw the second health minister walk out, believed to be because he disagreed with Jair Bolsonaro when it came to using the anti-malarial. But he's pushed it through from today. It means that anybody, even with mild symptoms, will be able to use it, but they do have to sign a waiver to make sure that they know what the side effects may be.
Now, Katie, stay right there because we want to turn to Manaus now. It's Brazil's biggest city in the Amazon, but even in this remote rainforest, coronavirus is taking a terrible toll. Just have a look at some of the images from Manaus. This is drone footage, and this is actually showing a mass grave being dug in Manaus. According to local reports, workers are burying 100 corpses a day. The Guardian newspaper is calling this an utter disaster. This report says that COVID-19 struck at the end of the rainy season when respiratory illnesses are actually common and hospitals are already stretched. So back to Katie. Katie, so even in somewhere as remote as Manaus, coronavirus very much present.
Absolutely. And I mean, Brazil is many different countries, if you like. Here in Sao Paulo, it's one of the most really well-resourced city with intensive care beds. You go further north into the Amazon. Manaus is the most isolated city in the country and one of the most under-resourced. And they've seen in the last few weeks this health system collapse, these mass graves being built. And of course, the threat, of course, is not just is not a normal threat. It's also the concern of indigenous groups, many of whom who live in Manaus and on the outskirts and beyond, and the concern, for those people, those communities, how this virus is going to affect them. And of course, you've got deforestation. Meanwhile, whilst everybody's been told to come indoors, you've got land grabbers, you've got illegal miners, people who are taking advantage of people not on the ground to be able to kind of wheedle their way in and cause havoc within the Amazon. It's a terrible situation up in the north of Brazil at the moment.
Let's take a look at the situation in Ecuador. The president has announced major public spending cuts. It's in efforts to tackle an economic crisis that has been made worse by the coronavirus pandemic. The government says that several embassies and consulates in Malaysia, Nicaragua and Iran will all close, while several state-run companies, including a newspaper and a TV station and also a state airline, will also shut. Spending cuts will also reduce the wages of thousands of state workers. Well, President Lenin Moreno says that austerity measures will save $4 billion, which is needed to control huge debt. In a television address, he said that we are fighting to stop infections and to reduce the number of deaths wrought by coronavirus. But at the same time, we need to stop our economy from collapsing. Well, this is how his announcement went down in the capital, Quito. These are rallies which took place on Monday. Many people holding up signs that say no cuts. Protesters are demanding greater government assistance, in fact. The pandemic has left 150,000 people unemployed. And Ecuador is among the worst hit by coronavirus in Latin America. More than 3,000 people have died there, 33,000 have been infected. Hospitals are overwhelmed. These images are from last month. These are mass graves being dug up in Guayaquil, the centre of Ecuador's outbreak. Bodies were in fact dumped on the streets. They were left in people's homes because cemeteries just simply didn't have the capacity to collect them. Concern, though, has now shifted to the capital, Quito, where 2.8 million people are under lockdown. Let's hear from its mayor.
The
maximum peak of this pandemic seen around the world starts to happen after day 70, so that would be around May the 26th for Quito. We are doing a follow-up and tests will be carried out throughout the city. We'll be the city with the largest number of tests per million inhabitants. But we must never think we're out of the danger, because it's obviously a very unpredictable illness.
Cross over to speak to Matias Zibel, who joins us live from Cuenca. We saw there the protest against these government cuts. We can see that Ecuadorians are not happy about them.
No, the protest started really last week, even before the President Moreno announced the public spending cuts. When he announced the cut in the budget of public universities, a lot of students went to the streets to protest. So we have been living a week of protest that obviously after the announcement of yesterday has increased.
And Matias, we saw those desperate images of bodies dumped on the streets in Guayaquil. Now, however, the focus of the centre of this epidemic in Ecuador is turning to Quito.
Yes, the situation has changed. Everything started in the coastal area of Ecuador, but now it's in the mountains chains. Quito is there, it's 2,800 meters over the sea. Quito suffered an increase in the number of dead in 1 week. Last week we had in Quito 106 dead people by coronavirus. This week we have 216, so we have 100 people dead just in 1 week. It's the biggest increase since the first case was confirmed in the city last 21st of March.
Really worrying there. And when it comes to the figures, how trustworthy are they? How is the testing situation there?
The number of tests has increased. The situation is not the same like the images that you show from the last months. For example, today Guayaquil goes from the red light in this traffic light system that the government declared to the yellow light. So the city more affected by the coronavirus last month now is coming back to normality. For example, the curfew will not start at 2 p.m. but at 9 p.m. But now the eyes of the country are looking at the capital city, Quito, and at the same time, we're starting to look to the Amazonia. The Amazonic provinces are the poorest in the country, and they started to register the first cases of coronavirus.
OK, Matias Zibel joining us live from Cuenca. Thank you so much for talking us through the situation in Ecuador. Thanks.